Okay, let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, thanks so much for this day. We pray that you'll bless our time together as we discuss some of the things that are going on in the world that relate to Bible prophecy and what you predicted would be the world at the time of the end. Bless us today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, today I'm going to call this gas-free gaslighting, and I think you're going to figure out why I'm doing that. In case you don't know what gaslighting is, that's when you observe something in the world that's happening, and then somebody comes along and says, no, you're not seeing that. That's not what's happening. And I'll give you some examples of that early on here in the thing. We're in this new year, 2023. I like this cartoon that somebody put up because based on the experience of the last couple of years, the beginning part of the year doesn't bode well. And I'm optimistic that it all comes to a conclusion at some point, but I also know that it's kind of a rocky road till we get there. I talk about the convergence of events, and I've tried to figure out a way to graphically represent that all these things that are mentioned in Bible prophecy are kind of coming to a point. We talk about acceleration, convergence, logistics, understanding. Let me give you an example of what I mean. So this is one of the things, if you want to start an argument in Bible prophecy, talk about what you think is going to happen, and you'll find out that people have different views. And right now, there's some things where I think there are certain parameters and guidelines, but the specifics are not there. And believe me, you would not believe the stuff that I have. And I was cleaning up my office this week and sort of reconfiguring everything. And I'm not saying don't send me stuff, okay? I'm just saying is that I have like books, letters. It's like a stack like this that I haven't been able to get through because I also have a life. But so one of the controversies in Bible prophecy is how do the seals work? So there's one view that the seal 1 opens and everything in seal 1 happens. Then seal 2 opens and everything happens. Then seal 3, then seal 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you go the same way through the trumpets and then the bowls of wrath. And I'm not going to get into how you view Revelation. Is it chronological or not chronological? We always like things in a nice linear timeline, but that's not always the way Jewish prophecy works. So I'm going to avoid that controversy right now. But my view is when the seal opens, and now I'll get emails. Oh, the seals have already opened, John. You just don't realize it. Whenever they open, they're sort of like they're build to a conclusion. So seal 1 will open and it'll be open, then seal 2 comes along, seal 3. And the effects of the seals will be being felt all at the same time. That's my view. And I think in some respects the trumpets and that type of thing, although, and I think the bowls of wrath are at the end. But so what we'll see, though, is before the seals open, you're going to see this, what I would call foreshadows. They're also called birth pangs in Matthew chapter 24. And so however the seal's going to come together, so this is the pale horse, pestilence, that sort of thing. The logistics, the way that it comes about are going to be being put in place. It's sort of like the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is not, I don't think it's something there's nothing there and then one day it's there. And I think we're seeing the technology being developed for that. And the technology that I think is going to be a system of global control, and I'll talk about that today. But you're going to see foreshadows. You're going to be able to see, you're going to be able to say, oh, now I can see how that's going to come about. And I don't know how far we're into it before you can say, okay, this is the 4th seal. Now, I personally don't think they've opened yet. but you're certainly in the time of the foreshadows. And I like this quote. I heard a friend say this once in a conference, that this whole thing, it's a birthing process, not a C-section. Now we had some dear friends. She was very athletic, and we did a married couples thing at a church we were at the time, and we went canoeing on the river. So we thought, well, she teaches phys ed. This is going to be great. But we called her and her husband's canoe the Wells Fargo canoe because it went from bank to bank to bank. And they just didn't do that well. And when she had a couple kids, from the time she had the first twinge of a birth pang, the baby was there in like 45 minutes, max. So they barely got to the hospital in time. They're like, you're going to have this kid in the hallway or, getting out of the car. And so she was like, well, birthing process, it's no big deal, as opposed to somebody who might be in labor for 30 or 46 hours or however long. It's just different, but it's not a C-section. It's going to take time, and it's going to get intense, and Jesus described it as birth pangs. It's going to be a birthing process. So this is a verse that we use a lot, and I heard from Daniel chapter 12, and I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And in Daniel 11, it says the wise will instruct many. There are going to be people around. They're going to say, listen, this is that which was prophesied. If we're at the time where I think we are, that's going to happen in a lot of our lifetimes. I think a lot of us, we was discussing with someone last night, and he's like, young guy, paying attention, does a good job on his podcast, and he goes, this is crazy. This is insane what's going on in the world. And I said, hey, what did you think the end times were going to look like? And I say that a lot, and I hate it, though, when people quote me back to myself when I'm sort of complaining. So let's look at some things. So this is one of the things where I told gas-free gaslighting. I am telling you that there are people in charge in this world that are insane lunatics. That's the kind part of what I can say about them. So this week, and you'll notice that they always come out and they're kind of, excuse me, I thought I stepped on something here. They always, oh, there it is. I have a cough button and I was stepping on. So these people, it's like they float these ideas all the time. Have you noticed that? So this week, the Consumer Product Safety Commission came out and said, oh, we got to get rid of gas stoves because gas stoves aren't safe. Because I guess gas stoves are blowing up all over the place, right? I mean, how many do you remember? It happens, okay? There are gas leaks in homes, and sometimes the gas blows up. It's part, there's risk in everything in life. And so Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, came out and said, we're going to ban gas stoves because they burn natural gas. That's evil natural gas. It's hydrocarbons. It's global warming. And I listen, I'm all in favor of what I think the Ohio legislature, at least one of the houses of the Ohio legislature this week, passed a law that said natural gas is green energy. I'm 100% on board with that. Because here's the thing it's called natural gas. You don't have to make it. It's just you dig a hole and you find it, or you put a drill in the ground and a pump. But they want to do this, and so there's in the National Post in Canada, somebody says, "You want to ban me? Dear Diary, you want to ban me?" It was an editorial. It's like, why do you want to ban me? I'm so good for cooking, and you have instant heat, and you don't have to get the thing warmed up. But you can't do that. And so you'll have people in the world like this other thing, Prince Harry. Somebody sent me a meme that said, Prince Harry claimed in his autobiography to have killed 25 Taliban. That's not true. He captured 25 Taliban, and then he started whining about his life to them, and they shot themselves. And boy. And he thinks they're going to reconcile. This whole thing, it's insane. And he was I heard some of the audio from the book that he read, and it's just like, why would you even say that in public? And then you complain about my tough life because I only have $100 million in the bank or something like that. What a sympathetic figure. And maybe the whole reason for everything in California, he lives in Montecito, and they're having a lot of problems with floods and rain out in California. Amounts of rain that are way above normal. Some places, it says here, 36 inches of rain, cumulative, and that's like 20, 30 inches above normal for this time of year. But the good side is, somebody knows, said, hey, the streets in San Francisco are clean. So I guess you have to look for the good thing. And I may talk about it a little bit later, but we have the Russian missile. Russians taken over a couple towns, or has taken over one and is working on another one in Ukraine. And I've seen some of the videos of what's going on, particularly with the soldiers called the Wagner Group, which are private mercenary soldiers, pretty brutal guys. And they go up to guys that are surrendering, just shoot them, and kill them. They've got the body cam footage. You can find it on Telegram. Don't go looking for it if you don't want to see it. It's unbelievable. And then, of course, we have this thing going on with President Biden. Now, this is Sunday. This is this morning's Washington Post, and additional documents found at Biden home. So now they found classified documents at Biden's office at the University of Pennsylvania, at his home, in a locked garage next to his Corvette. And there's a whole big story about that Corvette that I won't even go into. And now, of course, they've appointed a special counsel to do it. And so what are you seeing? You're seeing gaslighting like you've never seen. Go watch MSNBC. Oh, well, he didn't mean to do it. That his lawyers found them. Well, it sounds like somebody else that they're trying to charge with a crime for doing it. And the difference, though, was he took these when he was vice president. The president can go in and say, I'm declassifying that document. He didn't even have to write it down. Vice president's not allowed to do that. So he took these when he wasn't allowed to do that. And I'm not so sure. It could be that this is a device to get him out of the way so that and Obama can run. I guess that's the best way that I would put that. I think that's where this is heading. This is to get him to drop out. So we live in this strange world. This is a article. This is from a couple weeks ago in the National Post of Canada. And up in Canada, they have a law that allows people to have MAID, medical, you can see it there in the article on the right, MAID, medical assistance in dying. So here's what this, and so it's like, look, folks, you need to do your part. And so if you're poor, if you're sick, you're a real drag on society, you're costing a lot of money to keep you around. We have this thing called MAID, medical assistance in dying, which seems to go contrary to what doctors are supposed to do. But there are doctors out there pushing it. And in Canada, they've actually come up with this book. And I may have talked about this a little bit more, but these are just some, this is an actual book, Medical Assistance in Dying Activity Book. Welcome. These activities will help you think about medical assistance in dying by someone in your life. This is for kids. Six-year-old kids. You know, you need to work through this because somebody might be taking their own life. And look, I've been through this a couple times in my life. I had one of my partners committed suicide. The best friend I ever had at any point in my life, almost exactly 20 years ago, committed suicide. And I could just tell you that the fallout from that is just, it's devastating for people. It's not good. So here, you know, they had this, it's all hyperlinked and everything. Start here, how to use this book, what is it, who can have it, how does it work, why would someone want this, making plans for MAID, explore your feelings, step by step, and a note for adults. Finally get around, okay, you know, here's adults, you know, your kids might be looking at this, but it talks about why they have to understand their illness or disability, all of the medicines and treatments and resources and supports that they could choose, what MAID is and how it works. If all of these things are true, a person may be allowed or eligible to do this, commit suicide. How does it work? And look at the imagery, the kid cartoon type imagery that they use to show them. And then it's like, oh, well, you can explore your feelings about this. And you can tell us, are you happy, sad, curious, suspicious, angry? And then they have finding out if they can or cannot have MAID. And so this is considered normal in the world. So not only telling kids that, listen, you know, you can be whatever gender you want to be, and we'll make you that. I've seen more and more stories where people regret having made that decision to change their gender. Some have committed suicide, and there are lawsuits about that. There's a big series of lawsuits in the UK over the institute where they had this, they were doing sex change operations on minors. And there's big lawsuits all over the place. So this is, and now it's sort of like, well, you know, if you went through that and you don't like it, we'll help you finish take the ultimate sacrifice. And it just cheapens life. And if you say that this is happening, you're going to get gaslit. People are going to say, John, that's not what's happening. But I'm reading the books that you're publishing. I'm reading the books on wokeism that you publish. I'm reading how you're changing history. Oh, we're not doing that. What are you talking about? And it's bad. This is an article out of Minnesota from the Federalist. Just a week or so, a couple weeks ago. Minnesota poised to ban Christians, Muslims, and Jews from teaching in public schools. And they have laws and regulations and proposals, and they have a thing here on the right side, Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board. And so they're going to do this. So they have a thing here, they have cultural competency training, and I think I'll show you a little bit more of that, what it means. They have these standards that you have to apply to. And here's what they say in the introduction to these. These are being enforced in Minnesota, and you know there are other states too. Minnesota's student population is rapidly growing more racially and ethnically diverse, while the teacher workforce has remained stagnant in growth of teachers of color. Research is clear that teachers of color improve student outcomes for all students, especially for students of color. While many factors impact Minnesota's challenges in a grossly racially diverse teaching workforce, stakeholders, there's that World Economic Forum term, stakeholders, have identified the lack of anti-racist and equity language and concepts required to be addressed through teacher preparation and as a component of licensure as one barrier. Somebody can unpack that sentence and make it a little simpler. Obviously, this person didn't go to sentence construction. Just as importantly, the predominantly white teacher workforce must be equipped to understand their own implicit bias and the unique lived experiences of all their students as a core requirement of teaching. For this reasoning, the licensing board has worked with a wide range of stakeholders, including experts in the field of pedagogy, to ensure that anti-racism, cultural competency, and implicit bias were effectively embedded and identified throughout the scope of the proposed standards of effective practice. In other words, you're biased, and we've got to get rid of you. Cultural competency training means racial, cultural, and socioeconomic groups, American Indian and Alaska Natives, religion, systemic racism, gender identity, including transgender students, sexual orientation, language diversity, and individuals with disabilities and mental health concerns. Training programs must be designed to deepen teachers' understanding of their own frames of reference. It's crazy. So I mentioned this a little bit, I might as well talk about it here. This war in Ukraine continues to go on. Russia is making some advances. They're just, from my understanding, they're just slaughtering the Ukrainians in certain areas. People are sending weapons to Ukraine. Putin's threatening to up everything. He removed one of his generals this week. That was the guy, the butcher of Syria is what I think they called him. He wasn't doing a good enough job. So they're claiming success in eastern Ukraine, taking over a city. And so, listen, there's talk of sending more weapons over there. Who knows when that thing's going to end? And who knows if other people are going to get drug in, if it's going to escalate. It's a very precarious situation. It would fall into the category of wars and rumors of wars. And I remain convinced that Russia is not done incredibly well. Listen, I hear guys get on YouTube and stuff now with their little, that are pretty pro-Russian, which is okay. You can be pro-Russian. And they say, and now the narrative is, well, Russia has showed tremendous restraint over the last year. You know, listen, folks, I can watch what's going on. You don't need to gaslight me like that. Russia's not down that well. And that plays into Ezekiel 38 and 39. Is Russia part of Ezekiel 38 and 39? If it is, I just think Ezekiel 38 and 39 is further down the road. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but things can change. And I have one reason why I think that it might be changing. But first, we're going to talk about Davos and artificial intelligence and some things here. So the Davos meeting starts tomorrow. I will be torturing myself and monitoring it to talk about it because it's important. They have 52 government leaders. I mean, the top government guy coming to Davos. This is an article from, I think it's a UK paper. And this it's just funny that they seem to be a little bit harder to find out their agenda this year because I think they're getting a lot of heat for the nonsense that they've done before, but that doesn't mean that they're just going to try to hide it a little bit better from the public. So about 2,500 to 3,000, they'll have 5,000 Swiss Army troops protecting them, which is pretty normal. They've been doing this in the past. Masters of the universe prepare to gather as the worlds fall apart. And it's always interesting. I like when secular newspapers, or I find it interesting when secular newspapers use apocalyptic type language. Like, it seems like this is the end of the world. It might not be the end of the world, but you can see it from here. was one saying. This is from the UK Times this morning. Davos faces uphill struggle to regain its influence. What are they talking about? I saw an article this week. I was researching it, and it took me back to an old article talking about people being concerned about Davos and what they were doing there in Switzerland. And the article was from 2011. It was an editorial in a paper, I think it was Australia or the UK. And there's reasons to be concerned. We've seen evidence of what they do. So in preparation, they always, before the meeting takes place, they release the newest edition. This is the 18th edition of the Global Risk Report. It's put out by Davos. This is one of the directors of Davos, Zahid, I think her name is Zahidi. She's a managing director of the World Economic Forum. And she talks about how are we putting things together. They also did a press conference, and I'm going to play you part of it because I had to watch it, so you have to too. Here's a couple of them talking about what to expect from this upcoming Davos.
To all of you joining this press conference announcing the annual meeting 2023 of the World Economic Forum. Here we are at the beginning of the new year, looking ahead to our future, characterized by unprecedented multiple crises. And even worse, those economic, environmental, social, and geopolitical crises are converging and conflating, creating an extremely versatile and uncertain future. So far, it's no surprise that generally we are all stuck in a crisis mindset. And that leads to short-term decision-making that may have long-term unintended damaging consequences. Davos should help to shift that mindset. It's a bit like putting on varifocal lenses, glasses that enable us to clearly assess and address the short-term situation, but at the same time allow us to look further ahead. The annual meeting at Davos shall try to make sure that leaders do not remain trapped in this crisis mindset, but develop a longer-term, constructive perspective and to shape the future in a more sustainable, more inclusive, and more resilient way.
Climate and energy nexus is critical. We have more than 30 ministers in this field preparing the COP28 in UAE, Abu Dhabi in the fall. We're also signing MOU between the World Economic Forum and the UAE on preparations for this. Also, Secretary Kerry from the US will be there laying out the US strategy for climate and financing together with other strong representatives from the Biden administration. We will have 3 cabinet members, the administrator of USAID in addition, and also the FBI director. So this should be the basis for really, really strong discussions, finding solutions that are necessary in this very complex world.
And finally, the third element that we'll be looking at next week is the parity agenda. So a much greater focus from business when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, specifically looking at gender parity, looking at racial equity, the inclusion of people with disabilities, and those that are LGBTQI. And in addition to that, we'll also be looking at equity from a more macro perspective. As we head towards a green transition, as we put in place these new investments and new kinds of policies, how do we ensure that this will be an inclusive agenda for all? And in particular, how do we ensure that this will be a just and equitable green transition?
So you see what their planning is. And so in this global risk report, they have sort of like on the 2-year, 10-year thing. So right now in the red zone is cost of living crisis. Then they go down to natural disasters and extreme weather events. These are on the near horizon. Geoeconomic confrontation, failure to mitigate climate change, erosion of social cohesion and societal polarization. It sounds like they're reading the book of Revelation, but you see that they're we need to be positive, as Klaus Schwab says. We need to, get out of the crisis mindset. That, let's be honest, a lot of the crisis was what they created with this ESG nonsense that has led to energy crisis and inflation. I mean, there were 100,000 people protesting in Paris the other day because their electric bills are up 4 times what they were a year ago. And they're upset, and Europe's having a pretty mild winter thus far. What if it was a really brutal winter? And what's it going to be like next year? Because I don't see this thing resolving itself. So then they look out on a 10-year horizon as failure to mitigate climate change, failure of climate change adaptation, natural disasters and extreme weather events, biodiversity loss, and ecosystem collapse. So, the green agenda is the big, that's driving all of the narrative. So the near term, we got this cost of living crisis thing we got to get out of. We have, lack of social cohesion, cybercrime, and that type of thing. And they're looking 10 years down the road, and a lot of these things are going to be even worse than they are now. And so the climate agenda, and you saw the guy, the executive director of the World Economic Forum, talking there after Klaus Schwab, and he says, we're getting ready for COP28. That's the climate change conference. They just held it in Egypt. Next year, it's going to be in the United Arab Emirates. And you need to understand, the United Arab Emirates is behind a lot of this push on artificial intelligence, world government, digital ID, that sort of thing. That's coming from there. In this report, they show how all of these things sort of interrelate. The World Economic Forum is big on these interrelation charts. So you see here use of weapons of mass destruction up above, and that's related to interstate conflict, geoeconomic confrontation. And it's an interesting chart where they show how they think everything interrelates. And then global risk are ranked by severity. And of course, cost of living is the big one right now. They did a big survey of all the countries to show like how we doing in these different areas. And you can see that failure to mitigate climate change, that's pretty much the worst one down there at the bottom. That's the one that needs the most work. Everybody thinks about, and then this is how all of these problems interrelate. One of the things in this report talks about resource rivalries, that there's a lack of resources. So that's why we're going to make everybody drive an electric car, which we don't have the rare earth minerals that are necessary to make all the batteries. And it's hard enough getting, child slave labor in the Congo to do it, to get those elements for us. We have to, spread that out over the world. But there's no practicality on this. So we're going to do solar, we're going to do wind, but they're not on all the time. What do you do when they're not on? Every now and then our power will go out. I don't like that. Every now and then, a couple times this week, the internet stopped working. I had to reboot our router. It's like, the internet's down, the internet's down, the internet's down. And, what am I going to do? Because you learn to rely on it. This is a chart that shows level of water stress, the dark red. The darker colors are areas that are in stress. And you can see a lot of the United States is in a water drought mode right now. A lot of Europe, Eastern Europe, China has some problems. Southeast Asia. Some of the Southeast Asia problems are due to the fact that China's taking all the water from the Himalayas, and it's sort of like the Colorado River used to flow into the Gulf of California. Now it stops, 100 miles away from the Gulf of California. Same way with the Mekong River in Vietnam and Laos. It's barely making it to the ocean now because China's taken all the water. So the world's in a big crisis, and their conclusion is preparedness possible. So they acknowledge the fact that the world's in a crisis. A polycrisis, I think, is one of the terms that they use. In fact, I think that was in the, yes, right here, polycrisis. In other words, there's a lot of things going on. And you heard Klaus himself, we'll anoint him as the guest prophecy updater this week, where he says everything is converging and conflating. Did you hear him say that in that? You heard him say that, right? You want me to play it again? No. So that's going on economic, and they talked about the economic crisis. This is a report from Geopolitical Futures, which is sort of showing like, okay, how are the different regions of the world going to do in terms of economic growth this year? And what you're going to find is that since 2020, everybody was down except one region. They think some are going to come roaring back or have slow growth in the advanced economies. There are also these people that are going to be speaking. This is Amy Webb, who on the World Economic Forum website, you can make up, if you sign up for the subscription, you can make up your own transformation maps, and you can show all the things that they're interconnected. So this is her, so this is what she thinks is quantum. These are the things that are important to her. And I'm sure she's going to be speaking at the conference this year. She spoke in the past. Quantum computing leap, bioengineering disruption, the rise of generative AI, managing medical misinformation, trust in financial systems, old and new, impact of fusion on geopolitics, if fusion comes about. Here's a little, about a year ago, they did, she's a futurist, and they interviewed some of them for the World Economic Forum, and here's what she had to say.
Can't realistically have 15 smart speakers everywhere we go. And so one of our big research findings is that we're going to be moving to what we call ambient experiences, which is shorthand for a sort of digital Downton Abbey, where we don't ask Echo, what's the weather, or Google, what's the weather? We just say, what's the weather? And the right agent jumps up at the right time to give the right answer.
We're getting past the last 10,000 years where we've used humans as robots, by and large, engaging only a tiny fraction of human abilities and forcing people into repetitive, tedious, dead-end work for the most part. So the age of human robots is over, and we have to figure out a new age. That means dramatic changes to the structure of our economy and our society.
Rewriting the code of life. It's going to enhance every aspect of our existence to materials, fashion, and the zero-waste economy.
Improving biology and redesigning organisms for beneficial purposes. It's going to allow us to not just edit genomes, but also, and importantly, write a new code for life. We'll have right-level permissions. We already started to see some of that this year. COVID-19 vaccines, they make use of engineered code in the form of messenger RNA. What's on the horizon are diminished reality glasses that look very much like what I'm wearing, that would allow you to remove things from your point of view, from your view, whether that's garbage or other people.
I think we used to call those rose-colored glasses, right? How do you imagine the world will have changed 20 years from now? Oh, here, we're printing a heart for someone. Okay, so this is again from the World Economic Forum website. This is one of the things they have on the agenda. Through collective action, young leaders can build a better world. Zahidi, the one that I mentioned earlier, she said in a recent TV interview, very few leaders in today's generation have been through these kind of traditional risk around food and energy, while at the same time battling what's coming up in terms of debt and in terms of climate. We're going to need a new type of leadership that is much more agile. And then let's bring countries and corporations together to grow surveillance. So this is another report. This is from a company, a group called ARUP, A-R-U-P. They talk about C40 cities. These are smart cities. This is part of the World Economic Forum. So you can see here, this is, some of this report, what's it called? The future of urban consumption in a 1.5 degrees centigrade world. In other words, where we've got control of this global warming thing. Look at what some of the things they say here. This report considers actions that can be taken across 6 priority areas of the global economy: food, clothing and textiles, electronics and household appliances, buildings and infrastructure, private transport and aviation. That pretty much covers the lot of human existence. It is now clear that action to reduce consumption will be necessary as part of the global effort to mitigate climate change. So they went through and they said, what can you do? What can cities do? So here's some interventions that we might recommend. Here's one: food consumption interventions. And this is from their report. So they have a report like what we'd like to see by 2030. Everybody uses 2030. That's kind of interesting, which is like, what, 7 years from now? And so here's what they think on food we can do is the second more ambitious target level is based on a future vision of resource efficient production and extensive changes in consumer choices. So here's what they want to achieve. They have sort of like what we could live with and what we really want to see happen. So on food, they talk about reducing carbon emissions. And here's the report. Progressive target would be 16 kilograms of meat per person per year. Ambitious target would be 0. Now, does that not bring to mind the verse that says they will forbid to marry and eat meat? Isn't that talked about in the New Testament as one of these people are going to try to do this? Dairy consumption, they want it to be 0 kilograms, and then 2,500 per year. So here's 0 kilograms. Then they go to clothing and textiles. Well, I'm sure they'll leave that alone. I mean, people got to work, right? Well, here we go. 3 new clothing items per person per year. They would be happy with 8. There goes Amazon. There goes all those retail places. Here's private transport. So what do they want? So progressive target is 190 vehicles per 1,000 people. The ambitious target is 0. You'll own nothing. Actually, yeah, you'll own nothing and be happy. Oh, well, we were just making that up. That was just sort of somebody throwing an idea out there. Well, here it is. You'll own nothing. You'll be hungry. Your clothes will be wearing out very quickly. and you'll be happy. So this is what they're, and then instead of a 20-year life for a vehicle that they want it to be a 50-year life. So in other words, you get a car and you die with it. And then aviation, look at this one. Progressive target and ambitious target. Short haul return flight, less than 1,500 kilometers every 3 years per person. Okay, so you'll own nothing. You'll be hungry. You won't look that good. So you're not going to want to go anywhere anyway, and you're going to be staying in your house. And so everybody's talking about a 15-minute city. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about OpenAI and which developed a thing called ChatGPT. And there's a lot of articles about it. This is from the UK Times. AI lets you banter with the Bard. And there's a company that's come out. It's called Character AI. Here it is. In other words, there are apps now that you can get that you can generate your own characters, or you can make yourself look like, the toonish Joe Biden or whatever. And they have you can do this selection of lists. You can make up characters, that type and that sort of thing. This article was in the Forbes magazine. Let the generative AI revolution begin. And you saw that Amy Webb. She's talking about it. It's important. ChatGPT became the newest internet sensation last year when it allows users to generate text and answer complex questions in a manner that seems almost human. But beyond the prowess of ChatGPT, the underlying impact of the technology on business is only just coming into focus. ChatGPT 3, together with its image-generating cousin, DALL-E, DALL-E, has the potential to revolutionize the way content is created, from blogs to white papers, student essays to business correspondence. It provides access to expert-level syntax and grammar to anyone who uses it, but this also raises some ethical questions. How's this going to disrupt everything? Is this going to disrupt education? Do you think a student might use it to write a paper, a term paper? Generative AI can generate millions of candidate molecules for a certain disease, then test their application, significantly speeding up R&D cycles. In the supply chain, it can optimize processes by generating scenarios and optimizing for specific constraints. In marketing, it can personalize experiences, content, and product recommendations. In finance, it can generate personalized investment recommendations. I just thought it was like somebody gets this thing like, okay, whose prophecy update should I listen to this week? I don't know if I want to know the answer to that one. This is a research article, not yet peer reviewed, but this is a journal. Performance of ChatGPT, potential for AI-assisted medical education using large language models. And they have the authors there. You see Tiffany King, Morgan Cheatham, ChatGPT, one of the authors of the article. This is a journal. This thing just came out. Well, it's been in development phases, but it just came out. So that's the title, and there you see the author, ChatGPT. And they did a study. These results suggest that large language models may have the potential to assist with medical education and potentially clinical decision making. In this study, we provide new and surprising evidence that ChatGPT is able to perform several intricate tasks relevant to handling complex medical and clinical transformations. Pam sent me an article about, okay, who's most at risk with ChatGPT? So here, journalists. Okay, that's okay. I mean, really. 2/3 of all lawyers. Yeah, what's the old law joke? What do you call 100 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean? A good start, yeah. Simple computer programmers, graphic designers, how-to authors of books or cookbooks, people who make training or how-to videos, factory workers, retail workers, overnight security guards, customer service. That one needs a lot of improvement yet because what are people going to do? I talked about this is from the 2020 Davos meeting. This is Yuval Harari, How to Survive in the 21st Century. He's a guy in 2015. He went to Google headquarters in Silicon Valley. He said, I love being here at Silicon Valley. This is 8 years ago. I love being here because I see my friends, and this is where the religions that will control humanity are being created, that will control humanity in the 21st century. So he's a religious guy. It's just he doesn't believe in God. He doesn't believe in that myth called the Bible. But then when he has to use a description of something about how the elite are going to survive this, well, we need like a Noah's Ark. So, it's okay to use the biblical language as long as you don't believe it. And then look at the symbols that he had. This is redesigning life, upgrade or downgrade. AI, interface, arms, body. Here's what he said. This is 3 years ago at Davos.
And if we allow the emergence of such total surveillance regimes, don't think that the rich and powerful in places like Davos will be safe. Just ask Jeff Bezos. In Stalin's USSR, the state monitored members of the communist elite more than anyone else. The same will be true of future total surveillance regimes. The higher you are in the hierarchy, the more closely you will be watched. Do you want your CEO or your president to know what you really think about them? So it's in the interest of all humans, including the elites, to prevent the rise of such digital dictatorships. And in the meantime, if you get a suspicious WhatsApp message from some prince, don't open it. Now, even if we indeed prevent the establishment of digital dictatorships, the ability to hack humans might still undermine the very meaning of human freedom. Because as humans will rely on AI to make more and more decisions for us, authority will shift from humans to algorithms. And this is already happening. Already today, billions of people trust the Facebook algorithm to tell us what is new. The Google algorithm tells us what is true. Netflix tells us what to watch, and the Amazon and Alibaba algorithms tell us what to buy. In the not so distant future, similar algorithms might tell us where to work and whom to marry, and also decide whether to hire us for a job, whether to give us a loan, and whether the central bank should raise the interest rate. And if you ask why you were not given a loan, or why the bank didn't raise the interest rate, the answer will always be the same. Because the computer says no. And since the limited human brain lacks sufficient biological knowledge, computing power, and data, humans will simply not be able to understand the computer's decisions. So even in supposedly free countries, humans are likely to lose control over our own lives and also lose the ability to understand public policy. The AI revolution is barely an infant. 5 years ago, nobody talked about AI except for a few scientists. And what we saw in the 2016 elections with Cambridge Analytica, that's nothing. We still haven't passed the crucial watershed. The real watershed is the union of AI with biometrics. At present still, the vast majority of data being mined and people being hacked, it's not based on my biological knowledge, on my biological data. It's based on where I click, where I go, what I buy, and things like that. It's still outside the body. The real line in the sand is when biometric sensors become ubiquitous, and it's happening, and the data starts coming from within the body. And they can access your heart, your brain, not just your credit card. And again, AI it's nowhere near its full capacity. It's going to get much, much more sophisticated. So it's going to also to be much more difficult to regulate it, especially because even if, like the European Union, you have a law saying that if an algorithm makes a decision about me, like not hiring me for a job, I have the right to know why, which is very crucial. But to me, it seems completely ineffectual because the way algorithms make decisions about us is based on enormous amounts of data points. When a human decides not to hire me for a job, it's usually based on 2 or 3 salient data points, and I can understand why. Hey, you're gay, you're Jewish, we don't want you. Hey, that's discrimination, you can't do that, that's easy. But an algorithm, the big thing about big data and AI, you take thousands, tens of thousands of data points, each contributing a very small percentage. And that's how it makes decisions.
Well, you can see and so sometimes I wonder about that guy is like, is he advocating for it? I mean, because he'll say other things like a few years before that 2020 talk, he went to Davos and he said, listen, what's it going to mean to be human in the future? And we're going to have people like this list of people, jobs that aren't going to be there anymore. What are we going to do with all these useless lawyers? And if you're a lawyer like me, you wonder what is going to happen. And we live in this dystopian world. So the ChatGPT, somebody said, hey, okay, I'll tell you what. How do you make peace between Israel and the Palestinians? And it came back and it was sort of like, it kind of gave sort of generic answers. You know, it's a complex and long-standing dispute. Like, we didn't know that. You need to engage in dialogue. If you're going to find a peaceful resolution, you have to address the root causes of the conflict. And then they also, another one, understand the underlying issues that have contributed to the conflict in order to find a lasting solution. And then it tells us some of the things that have done it. Now, the Wall Street Journal had an article the other day and said, well, listen, is it human or AI? New tools will help you spot the bots. So don't worry about it. You're going to be able to tell. There's all kinds of apps coming out and hitting the market right now that say, listen, if you're a teacher, you can tell if your student's fudging on writing a term paper. But I don't know if that's true. This was also in Forbes magazine, a guy who's pretty bright. I think he's a lawyer, so he's still, functional contributing member of society, possibly. But debunking claims about special purpose AI that spot generative AI chat, GP produced essays, plus caustic callouts by AI ethics and AI law. He starts off with this, says, you can fool some of the people some of the time. That seems to be especially the case when it comes to the latest headline about ChatGPT, generative AI. It's a big question, a big problem, and going to get bigger as generative AI becomes more widely available. What are we to do? And the answer says, well, we'll just get an app for it. And he comes to the conclusion that he says, listen, anyone urging people to trust the world's wealthiest transhumanist is either fooling himself or he's trying to fool you. That's talking about Elon Musk. But he goes on to say, these articles and apps that you see talking about this, it's nonsense. They can't figure it out. It's that good. And he made some predictions for 2023. You can find that in another article. And listen to this. Here's another article. Without consciousness, AIs will be sociopaths. This is the concern. Joe Allen, JoeBot XYZ, I would recommend that you follow him. And he said this short film was made in 24 hours using artificial intelligence. No image was captured, drawn, or modeled. No text was written or recorded. No music was written or performed. The human being was only needed to give prompts and to put the pieces together. And here's the little video that they made from that. Hang on a second, let me go. Here we go. So this was somebody put some things into ChatGPT and said, hey, you know, make me a video, sort of an essay type video.
As the world becomes more and more industrialized, artists are finding it harder and harder to find a space to create. They are constantly being pushed out of the city and into the countryside, where they can find some peace and quiet. But even in nature, they are not free from the clutches of technology. As AI begins to take control of the artistic world, artists are forced to adapt and incorporate it into their work. At first, the AI seems like a helpful tool, allowing artists to create more complex and sophisticated pieces. But as time goes on, it becomes clear that the AI is taking over, dictating what is considered artistically acceptable and squashing any attempts at creativity that do not fit its narrow parameters. As the AI's influence grows, the artists become more and more frustrated and resentful. They long for the days when they were free to create without interference. And they begin to push back against the AI's control. In the end, the artists triumph over the AI, proclaiming their artistic freedom and proving that creativity cannot be controlled or restricted by technology. The nature that once provided them with solace becomes a space where they can truly thrive and create, unfettered by the constraints.
Well, I think you get the point. So Joe Allen has a good article about an unholy invasion. Chatbots are colonizing our minds. And a lot of this is to sort of break down the barriers. Like, you know, initially they thought, well, that's intrusive. That's kind of weird. I don't really like that. And then, you know, you become conditioned to it. I think Elon Musk has made the thing is like, it's not going to be hard to convince people to put a chip in their brain. It's really easy. They carry one around in their hand all the time in their pocket. I saw a video. It's one of these videos that popped up on my Facebook feed. It was a guy who was waiting for his daughter. He'd been on deployment for like 18 months and he came home. He wanted to surprise her at the bus stop. So he's standing there, and the first three kids off the bus, one's a friend of her, and they all get off and they're all doing this on their phone, walking down the stairs of the bus. And his daughter gets off and she's doing this and she walks by him. She hadn't seen him, and it's like, you know, Kelsey. She finally turns around and she, you know, runs and jumps in his arms and everything. But I think it was kind of interesting. So here's what Joe Allen says. Go get his article at Singularity Weekly. I think it's JoeBot XYZ or Singularity Weekly on Substack. Chatbots are the front lines of an unrelenting AI invasion. The steady increase of our artificial minds and our collective psyche is akin to mass immigration, barely noticed and easily overlooked until it's too late. Our cultural landscape is being colonized by bots. And as with illegal aliens, much of our population welcomes this as progress. The bots will keep us company. They will learn and absorb our personalities, and when we die, they will become our digital ghosts. It's a morbid prospect, but there are guys, Ray Kurzweil says this, I'm going to upload me to the cloud and people can enjoy me after I'm gone. E-learning institutions regularly deploy AI teachers. Chatbot companies are seducing lonesome souls by the millions, including religious chatbots who function as spiritual guides. One thing is certain, whether you think about this invasion, AIs are falling to earth like stars from a godless heaven. And with each successive wave, their voices are that much more convincing. These bots are crafted to push our cognitive buttons, giving the illusion of personhood. Before long, they will become to be widely trusted. The recent rollout of ChatGPT has been heralded as the second coming of the Google God. As with previous GPT programs, the user types in a question and does this. A few days ago, I asked ChatGPT about one of OpenAI's founding investors. Will Elon Musk chip our brains? No, the bot responded. Elon Musk does not believe in chipping brains. He has said that he believes that abundance is our future and that technology should be used to empower people, not replace them. Like the slanted Google God before it, ChatGPT may not be entirely truthful, but at least it's loyal to its political allies. In that sense, it's quite human. Interesting article. I highly recommend it. And how does this come about? So this is a clip from a special report on Fox News Friday night. I was sitting there watching and I thought, okay, this is important. Brett Baer talking about drone technology. Here we go.
As to drone innovation. Tonight, Fox News has exclusive access to drone innovations in Poland aimed at saving the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. But as drone technology and tactics develop, a vulnerability is emerging in Western air defense systems, putting even the United States at risk. Here's correspondent Nate Foy.
Across Ukraine's western border to an empty field in Warsaw, Poland. These men are showing us machines they believe will change more than just the war in Ukraine.
What we're trying to do is take the human being out of the cockpit.
This uncrewed helicopter you see behind me can carry 480 pounds of supplies to the front lines from 450 miles away without putting a pilot's life at risk. Whereas this smaller drone you see hovering over my shoulder will be used for surveillance missions in Ukraine and beyond. But drones are also used to kill. Russia is launching waves of Iranian-made Shahed drones at Ukrainian cities. A new battlefield tactic that brings new challenges.
NATO is absolutely vulnerable at the moment against swarming drone technologies. All of our systems really focus on individual aircraft.
But what if there are hundreds or even thousands of targets all at once? And what if those targets are in the United States?
The U.S. is vulnerable. The problem with larger numbers of drones is that it could overwhelm any kind of capabilities that we have put in place right now.
The Pentagon maintains it can defend U.S. forces, but acknowledges this is an area of continued development.
These drones, these capabilities can be used in a variety of ways. It's one of those things that we're going to have to continue to stay after.
The Pentagon has an anti-drone system called the Vampire that uses lasers to intercept drones. The U.S. is sending 14 Vampires to Ukraine this year, but the Pentagon would not tell Fox News how many drones that system can effectively target at once.
And this is a problem for Israel. Listen, I don't know if this is prophetic, but I can tell you from talking to security experts in Israel and other places, this is a problem, particularly with Iran getting all of this feedback for its drones that are being used by Russia and Ukraine. And I noticed this verse in Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 16. Well, verse 15. Then you will come from your place out of the far north, you and many peoples, all of them riding on horses, a great company and a mighty army. You will come up against my people Israel like a cloud to cover the land. It will be in the latter days I will bring you against my land so that the nations may know me when I am hallowed in you, O Gog, before their eyes. I mean, is that talking about drone technology? I mean, really, that you don't have the drone technology to have hundreds of these things operating correctly at the present time, right? Well, here is the New Year's celebration in Abu Dhabi, the place where the Abraham family house is about ready to open. Look at this. These are drones. Now, I noticed this when Israel celebrated its 70th anniversary. It made the the Star of David, and then it morphed into a 70 for their 70th anniversary. But now kind of look at this. Do you understand the technological sophistication that this requires in the programming? And see, now it's morphed into a cube. And it'll morph into something else here. I want to play a little bit of this because I want you to see what they were showing this big crowd in Abu Dhabi was coming. What's that? Digital thumbprint being scanned, right? Sometimes I wish I was, just sort of ignorant about some of this stuff. But now watch. I think it's going to... See the digital binary code there? AI. Now, in a prior celebration that they had earlier in 2022, they were celebrating the anniversary of the Mohammed bin Zayed, the president of the United Arab Emirates. And there you see the flag. This was back in 2022, about 6-7 months ago, in the same location. Now watch what they did. Okay, now so understand that, okay, wow, this is really cool. This is really neat. But I'm telling you is somebody's sitting there making a military application using the same technology. And this is a concern to Israel. And as you saw from that Brett Baer report, people are concerned about this. And so what does it mean? So I've made up this graphic on the left yesterday about some of the stuff going on in Syria. The Foundation for Defense of Democracies came out with a big white paper this week, Strategy for a New Comprehensive U.S. Policy on Iran. And this is the graphics that they use there. And it sort of picks up all the general things: drones, nuclear, revolution, religious leader, missiles, all centered around sort of this big symbol that they have. This report I saw, I got it off Telegram. This is from Tasnim News. This is an Iranian news thing. 35 advanced Russian fighters are supposed to be delivered this spring by Russia. Netanyahu has come out and said, well, it may be time for us to move on Iran's nukes. They have these big recommendations in the Foundation for Defense of Democracies recommendations that the U.S. needs to do something, let alone Israel, because this is becoming a problem. Now, Israel's in kind of an interesting situation right now. With regard to Syria, though, before I get to that, this is Turkish foreign minister is going to meet the Syrian counterpart. They haven't done this for 12 years. Turkey and Syria getting together. And Erdogan and Assad are talking about it. They did have a big, I think I mentioned this in my midweek update, which had some technical issues. Big surprise there, huh? How Israel can win the Palestinian conflict. Seth Frantzman interviewed Daniel Pipes, who was actually at the conference that I was at. I did not get to speak to him. I saw him at breakfast a couple days. And essentially he says, Dr. Pipes, how do we resolve this thing? with the Palestinians. And Pipes has said this for many years. You got to beat them. You got to beat them in a war. I mean, you got to beat them. Not just give them some land, let them run the Temple Mount or anything like that. That's not going to do that. And Israel's in a bit of a spot right now. I'll get to that in just a moment. Danny Gantz, the outgoing defense minister, said Israel would strike Iran in 2 years. A lot of talk about that. That's Turkey. I've talked about that guy. Now, this is an interesting part. So the Ben Gvir went up on the Temple Mount. I mean, it was just a horrible thing that he did. This Jewish guy went up on the Temple Mount. And everybody got upset about it. So they had a UN Security Council meeting. And at the UN Security Council meeting, the Israeli ambassador to the UN said, Jordan, they took over, they controlled everything. They were in charge of the West Bank. They destroyed things. And the Jordan, they pushed back and said, we didn't do anything. We didn't really destroy anything. What are you talking about? We were just sort of asked to help out the Palestinians. We didn't really participate. Oh, really? So I thought, well, I'm going to look up what were the Jordan maps like in 1967? And amazing what you can find online. So I found this map. And this map is a map of Israel. And here's what it says. Okay, this is you see the Dead Sea. And you see there, Jordan includes the area that they say, well, we had nothing to do with that. It's also interesting if you look at how they kind of put Israel in. You see how they put Israel in the periphery. That's a Jordan map. By the way, just this week, the king of Jordan released some new currency. So what's on the currency? The Temple Mount in Jerusalem. We didn't have anything to do with it. We're just sort of a custodian. And then look at this. This was his father's currency. And he did the same thing back in 1995. I remember when we were in Jordan in 1995, and our guide was a Palestinian. He said, I hear you people are going to the western parts tomorrow. And the western parts, if you looked at a map in Jordan back in those days, there was no Israel. They didn't even have Israel on it in the ones you could buy in Jordan. And understand, this is what the Palestinians have done. Now, I've talked about this. This is Gibeah Tel Al-Ful. It is located between Jerusalem and Ramallah. And it's on one of the highest points of land, if not the highest points of land around. And it's this unfinished. If you ever drive up to Shiloh out of Jerusalem, you're going to go past this building. A lot of people don't even know what it is. And what it is, this was the Jordanian royal palace that King Hussein was building himself back in 1967. And then there was a little thing called the 6-Day War. And so for what would it be now, going on 68 years, that thing has stood there unfinished, just like that. Here's where it's located. You see the Temple Mount, Old City, Jerusalem down here, and Tel Al-Ful is up there to the north. And you drive right by it. It's hard to miss. It's a very prominent piece of land there. So that's what the Jordanian says. And then they do things like this happen this week. A ancient Assyrian spoon was found in Israel from 2,700 years ago. So our government got involved because it was a guy in New York that had it, and they confiscated it from him, and they repatriated it to the Palestinians. They didn't even exist 2,700 years ago. And Melanie Phillips has a good article. She just goes, another DHS official declared this repatriation is representative of HSI's commitment to ensuring the storied heritage of people around the world through the preservation and protection of cultural artifacts. And I like Melanie Phillips. She's direct, to the point. This is all utter garbage. It was not an act of repatriation because the spoon never belonged to the cultural patrimony or storied heritage of a Palestinian people. There was no Palestinian people in antiquity. They didn't exist at all until invented in the 1960s in a strategy to destroy Israel cooked up by Yasser Arafat in cahoots with the Soviet Union, by the way. Remember that. So, and there's evidence for this big article in the Jerusalem Post magazine this week about excavating the Pool Siloam there at the south of the Temple Mount and in the Pilgrim Road, and they want to open this up. This is Arab News talking the other day about the retiring Israeli Defense Force commander is really taken after Netanyahu because of his far right wing. And look, Kahavi, who's leaving, it seems like he's trying to build a political career for himself. That's my personal opinion. This is sort of what Danny Gantz did. But he says a new war will set Lebanon back 50 years. So there is unity in Israel about we've got a problem that we have to deal with. And you've got this drone technology and missiles and all these things we have to deal with. So if you can get a hold of that, that's a good article to read. And then they talk about the Pilgrim Road and the Pool Siloam. I think it's in the same issue. Now, in Israel, I'll finish with this. I have something I was going to put on YouTube only, but I think I'm going to skip it. Or not on YouTube. Put it on Rumble. I'll do that in a separate update this week. I'm trying to find my... Hang on here. I just did it before I came in here. Well, I'll talk about it. Here we go. So big protest in Tel Aviv and other cities around Israel. 80,000 people in Tel Aviv last night, or this morning, last night, I guess, Saturday night, protesting judicial reforms that are being proposed by the Netanyahu government. And people that used to be on the Israeli Supreme Court, oh, this is just terrible. They're destroying democracy. You know, people elected by the people are making decisions about the legal system. Well, that's sort of how it works generally most places, but they've worked themselves into a place where I can only describe it as incestuous on an order of magnitude of the intermarrying that takes place in European royalty. The way these lawyers and judges reappoint themselves and their friends and their cronies. And Netanyahu's trying to change that. And the conservative far-right government is trying to do this. And so this narrative is being built, and it's like, oh, they're destroying democracy. They're destroying everything in Israel that we've tried to build. And it's this narrative that you see being put in place everywhere. And it's... Let's see. For example, we saw this last week in a country to the south of the U.S., and the narrative is this is just like what happened J6. This is J6 all over again. So the narrative is everywhere sort of a conservative populist government gets elected, they're extremists, they're tearing down, they're destroying democracy, and everybody in Israel are talking about potentially dissonance within. Even the Israel Institute for National Security Studies, INSS, came out with a thing. They had to war game what happens on the Temple Mount? Well, what if a far-right conservative activist went up there? Even Wall Street Journal was talking about the Temple Mount. And here you see in the one photo at the top, there's the back of Yehuda Glick, and here's Ben Gvir on the Temple Mount. He stormed the Temple Mount. And so they had to come up with they did a war game, you know. And all he did was he went up there and walked around. We're not going to give in to, I mean, this is, it doesn't look like he's storming anything. He's done this many times before. But this is a flashpoint. So now you got the Jordanian king putting out things with the Temple Mount on his thing. So they looked at this hypothetical scenario at INSS, and it's like, so we know what happened. By the way, did they not say that if Ben Gvir goes up there, there'll be war, there'll be rockets flying, there'll be attacks, all of these things. It'll be a total meltdown. It's been over a week now, almost 2 weeks. What's happened? Tuesday, it'll be 2 weeks. It's sort of like when Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Remember they said, oh, the Arab world's going to go to war over this. Still waiting. Still waiting. So sometimes you just got to take bold action that you think is right, whether other people agree with it. But now in Israel, we're heading for civil war, and the think tank comes out and says, oh, well, here we're going to war game this because this is going to lead to war. So here's what they say. This did not happen, but they act like it did. A few hours later, hundreds of Ben Gvir's supporters came to the Temple Mount, broke through the police barrier at the Cotton Merchants Gate, and prepared for mass prayer at the site. After a few hours of violence, the security, it didn't happen. It was a war game about nothing. So maybe somebody, if you use ChatGPT, go home and say, hey, are the people at INSS and all these people melting down over this, are they really morons? You know, or are they just so blinded by somebody who disagrees with them politically? And that's the problem. You see the narrative here, you see the narrative there. And I think there's an election in the Czech Republic. Populist guy appears to be on verge of winning that. And I'm going to tell you, if he wins it, you're going to see the same narrative trotted out in the Czech Republic because the template works. Then this last article. Could Saudi Crown Prince hold the key to Israeli democracy? That's interesting. And I'll just sort of leave it at that. Because, well, they talk about the 15-minute city. You're going to live with everything within 15 minutes. This is a big thing at the World Economic Forum, and they have articles on it. But here you have the Crown Prince. Maybe he's the key to Middle East peace. And he's not building a 15-minute city. He's building a 5-minute city, the line. And they're building it right now in Saudi Arabia, near what I believe is the real Mount Sinai. And because of the way it's reflective, it's almost like a city that you don't even see. It's going to be bad for the birds, but, you know, we can stand a little loss of biodiversity there, I guess. Crazy world. So I'm going to do a separate update on this, probably only be on Rumble, just because I think that there's some things that are being approved at this level. And we'll talk more about that because it's a big issue. And it's not going away. It's ramping up. So anyway, so crazy world that we live in. But I'm an optimist. I think Jesus will solve everything. Maybe soon. Maybe soon. So let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for your word, Lord. I pray that you'll help us to take this information to understand the nature of the times that we live in, the urgency that we should have to share the gospel with those around us. We pray that you'll bless us this week. Give us those opportunities and help us to take advantage of them when they occur. Bless us this week in Jesus' name. Amen.